Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference channel. My name is Jesse Day. We're counting down to the VRIC January 21st and 22nd. There's a link in the description below where you can get tickets. But for now, we're bringing the VRIC to you with our series of expert online panels. And I'm very excited for today because we have Mario Innecco of the Innecco 64 YouTube channel and Jack Gamble of the Nobody Special Finance channel. Two people I always enjoy talking to. Welcome to the VRIC channel.
Thank you, Jesse.
You're welcome, Jesse.
Happy to have you both here. So I want to get started by asking you a bit of a broader question, and that is, when you look out at the landscape currently, when we're looking at politics, geopolitics, the global economy, and financial markets, what are the main concerns you have? And I know that there's a lot of them out there, but what are you focused on at the moment that has you the most concerned? And Jack, I'll start with you.
So economically, there's no shortage of concerns, right? Commercial real estate is a big one. That's kind of this elephant in the room. That's this really slow motion train wreck. It takes a long time for those prices to move, and that's a market that's just kind of frozen in place right now. Housing market frozen in place right now. I could really lump those into the one category of the affordability crisis. You got people can't afford homes because the prices are at all-time highs and the interest rates are at 20, 30-year highs. Same thing in autos. People can't afford new cars because the prices and the interest rates are so high. So through the 1-2 punch of inflation and then higher interest rates to fight the inflation that the Fed created, the Fed has created an affordability crisis all across the economy. And they're doing everything they can to prevent wages from rising to solve that affordability crisis. So something's got to give there. Either wages have to lurch higher or prices have to come down sharply. And then geopolitically, obviously you've got, as economic crises mount up, what do world leaders typically do? Historically, they start wars. We're seeing that play out in real time, right? Virtually every corner of the world, there's either a hot war going on or there's the threat of war looming. And the U.S. just feels the need to get involved in every conflict that springs up everywhere in the world. So that's obviously a risk. And then domestically, you've got this downward spiral towards totalitarianism, something that really accelerated with the pandemic. And that's continuing as Orwellian policies that are meant to be the stuff of science fiction become normalized. And along with that slide into totalitarianism, you have this normalization of political violence that's starting to spring up in the West, where walk through a college campus, it's okay to punch somebody in the face because of a flag that they're waving or because of a hat that they're wearing. And we're equating somebody's opinion with an act of violence. And therefore, it's okay to hurt that person because of the way they think. So you've got that going on at the same time as this march toward totalitarianism. And I think if you extrapolate that across a couple more years, it's really frightening where we might end up.
Mario, I'd like to get your thoughts as well, and maybe if you could give us a bit of a UK perspective on things too, as you are located in London.
Yes, I pretty much agree with what Jack said about the economy and all the sectors not doing well because of rising rates. Here in the UK, it's the same story, even though we've seen now a bit of a relief rally in the bond markets, which means interest rates have come off. But I think for me, the biggest problem, not just for the UK, but for the whole Western world, is the debt. And not just consumer, household, or corporate debt, but especially government debt, and especially in the States. And I know I'm in the UK, but the US affects the whole world. And with interest costs just going over $1 trillion, with maturing debt and debt that the Treasury will have to issue in the next year, going up to almost $8 trillion. It's going to crowd out the private sector, is going to crowd out investments. And in the UK as well, I spoke recently about how taxation, and if you add inflation, it's taking almost 60% of the economy, productive economy. So I think that's the major problem for economies. Government is too big. Government is going to keep spending because there's an election. not just in the US next year, but here in the UK as well. They have to call a general election before the end of next year. So that's how I see things geopolitically. Yeah, I think it's all theater. And I know, unfortunately, people die and things happen, but all the wars are what they call bankers' wars, and they have been for 300 years. And I recently read an article in the FT that was talking about how the Bank of England, and I'm sure other central banks are involved with them, even though they didn't say anything about that. They're preparing for a massive another massive bond crisis, not just gilt or treasury, but also corporate bonds. And the narrative they're trying to create is that a major geopolitical crisis will trigger that. So that's what makes me, I'm not really worried, because that's what they want you to be worried. But I think they will use an excuse of some crisis to basically say, look, the bond market collapsed, not because we've been printing and borrowing so much, trillions and trillions upon trillions for the last 15 or 20 years. No, it was because of what China did over there, or what Russia did over there, or what the BRICS were doing. So that's how I see things.
Yeah, I saw a video recently of Biden giving a speech on a podium, and he was almost angry and defiant, saying we really need to talk about the fact that people think the government causes inflation. That's just not true. And he was like getting really worked up about it. It was quite a sight to behold. That's the message they're trying to get out there. I'd like to discuss Moody's downgrading the credit rating of the US. Is this a sign, in your view, that the mainstream and Wall Street are starting to catch on to the fact that a soft landing might not be possible? We're seeing, obviously, and we have been seeing a lot of more positive sentiment coming out of a lot of mainstream financial media, saying, look at the market, it's doing great, and it has been doing great when we look at the small handful of stocks that are holding up the S&P and the Nasdaq as well. But what are your thoughts on the credit downgrade? Do you think sentiment is going to start to shift? Will there come a point where the mainstream starts to, I guess, tell the truth for once? And Mario, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I think they didn't really downgrade, but they put them on negative watch. And Moody's is the only major agency that hasn't downgraded the U.S. from AAA. Back in August, I think it was Fitch downgraded the U.S.
Yeah.
And back in 2011 was Standard and Poor's. And I think it's mainly because they're seeing a lot of problem politically. It seems like Congress, either party, they can't get together, they can't solve anything. And I think people are starting to realize, and Moody's as well. And I would say Moody's is way behind the curve, but they've moved. Yeah, people are starting to worry that there's no end in sight to all the deficit spending. There's no political will from both sides to sit down and fix things. And I think anyway, it's if you look at that chart of the interest payments on US debt, it's taken off since last year. It's going to be impossible to stop that. I think it's just a mathematical thing. So yeah, as for the economy, I think the only reason the economy looks like it's growing is because of all the deficit spending. So it's all the government. So Moody's, I mean, they're always behind the curve. So is S&P and Fitch. If anything, I would be rating all the major Western countries almost junk.
Right. And Jack, your thoughts there. Do you think that the mainstream media is going to continue with the soft landing narrative right as the economy gets driven into the ground? Do you think things will start to shift? What are your thoughts?
Yes, I do think they will continue the soft landing narrative. And no, I don't think the Moody's downgrade has anything to do with the concept of a soft landing. No, I am convinced that nobody who's paying attention honestly believes a soft landing is possible. The people who are saying it in the press don't believe it. It's you would have to ignore such a mountain of economic data to believe that that's even possible. It's never happened before. It's not going to happen now that the problem is even bigger. If you go around, most of the narrative of the soft landing, I think, is centered around, oh, look, the stock market is doing so well, it's up, and therefore we've nailed the soft landing. And most people maybe hearing that message look at the stock market as a barometer of the economy and say, okay, maybe we did stick the soft landing. But if you look at why the market is really up, the worse the news gets, the better the stock market does. That's not because of the soft landing narrative. That's because of the belief that the Fed is going to burr again, that they're going to ZIRP again, zero interest rate policy and money printing. So the narrative of the soft landing is predicated that asset prices are going to rise again. Why would asset prices rise? Because the Fed lowers rates and prints money. Those are not things that happen during good economic times. So really what the soft landing narrative is telling people, without actually using these words, that the Fed and the banks and Congress have screwed up on such an epic scale that any day now they're going to take us back to the policies that caused this inflation mess. That's not a soft landing. That means we've screwed up so big that we know they are going to rob the masses via inflation again, driving our asset prices up and making us richer at your expense. Now, whether they do that or not is still up for debate, but the soft landing crew believes that's what's going to happen. I do think the Moody's downgrade probably has more to do with this war that's going on and this fight that's going on between the Fed and Congress right now, or the Fed and Treasury. We'll lump Congress and the Treasury together. Moody's looks at the points that Mario brought up about the rising interest on the debt and the rising servicing cost. And then they're looking at the ridiculous condition in Congress where, assuming these people aren't just frozen in place, or assuming their handlers have been able to wheel them into the committee meeting to just vote yes, that these people are not going to cut spending. And so you've got the Fed raising the cost of debt service while the people are creating more and more debts. This is a game of chicken between these two organizations, pulling in opposite directions. And I use the metaphor of parents fighting in front of their children. Doesn't matter who wins the argument, the kids lose, and we're the kids. So the Fed and Congress are arguing back and forth. No matter what happens, they're going to hurt us as the proposed solution to that.
Well, I want to shift to geopolitics a little bit here and talk about President Xi recently making a visit to the United States, where he met with President Biden. President Biden's handlers, or whoever is behind his social media account, put out some vague statement that while leader to leader, we really made a lot of progress, and both of our leadership is important to the world, and we feel like we can work together. What are your thoughts on the visit? Do you see any way for the US and China to actually be allies at some point, or at least to not eventually end up in a hot war? Jack, I'll go to you first on this one.
So first of all, I would like to congratulate Xi Jinping on what an effective ruler he is. I mean, he's not even in charge here. And in one day, he solved the homeless situation in San Francisco. I mean, that's magnificent. I don't know why every mayor in the United States...
They want to take him down to the border as well, don't they? The southern border. I heard.
Oh, yeah, he solved that one too. I mean, man, this guy's got his stuff together. I don't know why every mayor in the country isn't frothing at the mouth right now to get Xi Jinping to come visit them to solve their homeless problem. I mean, it's like, it's, to use another metaphor of the kids, it's like my girls when they tell me, oh, yeah, I cleaned up my room, Dad. And then you open the closet and all the crap comes falling right out off the top shelf because they just shoved it all in there, right? If somebody opens a closet in San Francisco, are all the homeless people going to fall out? Where did they put these people? And why is it suddenly humane that we can just forcibly remove these people, probably throw out what few possessions they had? We couldn't do anything about it last week, but now the problem just magically disappears. And, you know, if you're a business owner in San Francisco, you can't help but think how much your government hates you or how little they think of you. If they've told you for years, we can't do anything about it, we can't do anything about it, you just go ahead and do business while there's piles of human excrement on the sidewalk outside the front door, and somehow your customers need to step over that to get in the door and actually patronize your business, and then maybe the government will let you keep a few pennies of what you earn there. One visit from Xi Jinping and that problem magically goes away. Suddenly it's humane to just... So I'm going to end that rant right there. As far as the imagery and, you know, can we avoid war? Yes, there's absolutely. I feel like we're on autopilot spiraling towards that right now. But we managed to not blow ourselves up with the Soviets. So yeah, the historical precedent is there. But the Cold War was hardly bloodless either, was it? Right? There was proxy wars all over the globe. We view it as a success because we didn't go nuclear, but really people were slaughtered all over the world during the Cold War. So, I mean, that's probably like a good outcome in this scenario is, yeah, the two big players don't actually go to head, but they fight through proxies and you still have innocent people dying all over the place. And unfortunately, like Mario said, all wars are banker wars. And when things get bad leaders take you to war. Things are bad in China right now with their real estate collapse. Things are bad here with our affordability crisis. And I think leaders on both sides and bankers on both sides, the military industrial complex on both sides, are financially incentivized to see that conflict happens one way or another. And unfortunately, the people who make the decisions are controlled by those interests. So I'm not terribly optimistic here.
I'm Jay Martin. On November 30th, I'll be hosting an exclusive live online video event called Crisis and Chaos, The Changing World Order. I'll be joined by some of the world's top military experts, geopolitical analysts, and economic advisors. They'll be answering my questions and yours about the cascade of global crises since COVID-19. This event is for anyone trying to make sense of our crazy world. Find out what could be coming next and how you can prepare your mind, your money, and your family. Crisis and Chaos, The Changing World Order, an exclusive live online video event on November 30th. Click below to purchase your ticket now.
Mario, your thoughts on President Xi's visit and on the future of U.S.-China relations?
Yeah, I saw that a lot of U.S. business leaders, like who was it? Elon Musk, Cook, the CEO of Apple, and others paid $40,000 each to listen to Xi Jinping at the Hyatt Regency, I think, in San Francisco. And I think it's all like part of a theater. I think China and the US, I don't think he'd been in the US for 6 years, and you've had problems vis-a-vis Taiwan. I think Xi wasn't happy when Nancy Pelosi went to visit Taiwan last year. And so they're trying to like calm things down and basically tell us, the public, that everything's fine, everything's normal with China. Xi as well said, I kind of believe him more, but you can never tell. He said, we want to, compete, cooperate, do business with the US. And I think they do. They have a huge population, a huge market. They could benefit. American companies could benefit. But at the same time, I think there are there's a lot of Americans who are anti-China. Case in point, Kyle Bass. I'm not bashing him, but I looked at his opinion of what Xi just said, and he said, "How can they allow a genocidal leader, to come here and make peace with him?" So I think, the U.S. has a lot more to lose from China becoming stronger. So I think this is all kind of PR. And I don't think things are good. And the reason they're meeting is not because she's decided to come and see Biden. It's because there's a Pacific, Trans-Pacific conference, isn't it? And it happens to be in San Francisco. And I think if that conference wasn't there, I don't think they'd be meeting. So, yeah, I'm not too optimistic about it. I think, they could be doing this because they all work together. Who knows? It's all planned. I mean, the Oxford University, they don't only have a Rhodes Scholarship for U.S. students, like Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar. They also created some years ago a Rhodes Scholarship for Communist Chinese students. And guess who the sponsor of that is? Blackstone Group. So, yeah, I'm not too convinced. I think, like Jack said, in the end, us, the children, are going to suffer. And the elite in China, the elite in the US and the UK, they'll end up, making a fortune. But how it's going to evolve, I don't know. They could start, there could be some kind of event vis-a-vis Taiwan. Who knows? I think prior to World War One, all the major leaders in Europe were meeting with that chancellor of Germany, and it all looked pretty peaceful. And I think it was in 1938 there was a Munich conference, and if you're living back then, you probably thought, oh, everything's fine, we're not going to have a war anymore. So that's how I see it.
And you both recently discussed a book that I think is really important called The Great Taking. It's a free book available as a PDF online. I read it a couple months back, and it's pretty terrifying in many ways. Could you summarize the what this great taking entails, and more importantly, your view on how people can potentially protect themselves from it? And Mario, I'll start with you.
Yeah, basically, I read it online too, and I bought the hard copy because I think it's going to be an important book to have. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but I think the author contacted Jack online via email and said that he doesn't, there is a chance that it doesn't happen. But it's basically he goes over what's his name again, David Rogers Webb. He goes over how the people at the top, the bankers, the Federal Reserve, and the big families, they've been since the early 70s changing the way securities, stocks and bonds are recorded. I mean, the old days, you used to get your certificate. It was real paper. And then they created the DTC, the Depository Trust Corporation. And they employed a guy who was like a CIA guy who had no experience in finance. And he was nominated by a guy called Eugene Black, who was a former World Bank chief. And his father was a member of the Federal Reserve in 1933. So basically what they've been doing is, and Rogers Webb, he documents all the new regulations, all the new laws, and everything that is all above board over the decades that they've slowly built up, so that when there is a major crisis and all the derivatives, quadrillions of derivatives collapse, they can basically take your stocks, bonds, all your financial investments within the system and use it as collateral to save themselves. And they can even take physical things that you have, but you have some kind of loan attached to it. So I see the way to protect yourself is to have some protection outside the whole system, unencumbered by that debt. And that's the lesson of the great taking, I think. Does that mean you should just get rid of all your securities investments? No, I think each person has his or her own risk, profile, and they have to decide it for themselves and decide, what kind of probability there is that this great taking might happen. And he compares it, of course, to the great taking of gold in 1933. And this time it's going to be a great taking of all the, investments.
Yeah, and I found it kind of chilling when he was alluding to the fact that why would they do this? They don't need more money. And it kind of came down to pure malice, spite, and basically evil. Jack, I'd like to get your thoughts. You actually communicated with the author over email. Anything you could share of what he said, if you can divulge that, and also your thoughts on the book and how people might be able to potentially protect themselves from if this event transpires.
I believe the author, David Rogers Webb is his name. He used the phrase, the greatest subjugation in human history is what the great taking would be. And he paints a picture of, to mention earlier with the soft landing narrative and how everybody's just assuming the money printers come back on and interest rates drop again, which is what's happened for the last 40 years. But Rogers Webb entertains the notion of what if they don't? What if they don't lower rates again? And what if they don't print again? And he explores this scenario that would come out of that. And he's researched that the banking interests have actually spent the last 40 years preparing for this very scenario and putting the legal framework in place all over the world, mind you, not just here in the United States, but all over the world, They put the legal framework in place where during a deflationary collapse, the banks take everything. And one of the key facets to this story is something called the securities entitlement. Now, if you've got a Robinhood account or a Webull account, Schwab, whatever, you're buying your stocks, you think you own stock when you click buy, but really what you've done, you've given them your money and you've bought yourself a security entitlement. You don't have the share, you have a claim of a share or an IOU a share. The actual shares reside with the central clearing counterparties, in this case, the DTCC, this Depository Trust Commission, I forget the full acronym. But basically, those shares reside in a single pool, one pool where all the stock is, and then you have a claim on that. Well, those companies, those market makers and those clearing providers, they can go bankrupt just like any other company can. And if that company does go bankrupt, and there is a scenario where this could happen because we are so dependent on derivatives now, there's quadrillions of dollars worth of debt instruments and derivatives of derivatives all over the economy. If the defaults start in a scenario similar to how Silicon Valley Bank started, well, your asset is another man's liability. If that other man can't pay his liability, it's no longer your asset. Well, you've got liabilities too, so now you can't pay your liabilities, which is somebody else's assets, and this cascade of defaults wipes out wealth worldwide. And there's nowhere near enough money to satisfy the sale of all of these assets. So once it starts, there's no stopping it. And that's why every time things get bad, they just print money and dump it into the system to prevent that from happening. But now we've got inflation and it doesn't work that way anymore. And the laws are in place where, say, the DTCC were to go bankrupt. Well, we who own stock, we are unsecured creditors of the DTCC. These secured creditors, they eat first, right? When DTCC dies, the big dogs eat first, just like in nature, right? And the economy is an ecosystem just like nature. The big, powerful ones eat first, and then the scavengers, that's us. We pick the bones of whatever's left over. So all the assets are swept up to the banks, who are the secured creditors. And there's legal precedent for this. This happened during the GFC when JP Morgan seized assets that they were custodian of for Lehman Brothers. The courts basically ruled, because the banks are a systemic risk, they are the protected class. Those words from the court decision, they are the protected class. So they get the assets. And then if there's anything left, the people who thought they own stock, yeah, they get pennies on the dollar of what's left. So your assets go away, but you've still got your mortgage. You've still got your credit card debt. So you're left with no assets and all your debt, which means that the banks take everything. Or it's basically the scenario of you'll own nothing and be happy. It's the Great Reset. Everything gets taken from you. And I reached out to David Rogers Webb after reading the book because it was a very convincing read. It was incredibly well researched. I had to take notes while I was reading it to understand it because there's a lot of new phrases I didn't know. But I wanted to bring David Rogers Webb on for an interview. He's not interested in publicity. He's not interested. He's been carrying around this knowledge, and it's heavy and it's weighing on him. So he just wanted to get it out there because it was hurting him to know this and be unable to stop it. So he just wanted to warn people. And I don't have the email up in front of me, but his message when I reached out to him was basically, I don't want the interview, but he wanted me to give this message that there's still time to stop this. And that the people who stand to benefit from this, the banking interest, right? They have inherited this because the people who set this in motion, the people who put the legal framework in place over the prior few decades, a lot of them are dead. Most of them, the rest of them will be dead soon. So the current generation that stands to take everything in the Great Taking, they inherited this problem just like we did, and they don't have to do it. Right? There's still time. It doesn't have to be this way. And that was his message: is get the word out about the Great Taking, warn enough people so that these people who are lurking in the shadows thinking they're going to be able to get away with this, they realize, hey, there are pitchforks and torches out there. There are guillotines out there. And there's a historical precedence to what happens when subjugation on this scale happens. There's still time to stop it. And so he didn't use the pitchforks and torches. That was my embellishment there. He didn't suggest that, but that was Rogers Webb's message: is it doesn't have to be like this.
Yeah, that's a special type of desire to crush the middle class, to actually build this over decades to the point where you pass away yourself before you can see it be implemented. But just die happy knowing that in the future this is going to happen to people. It blows my mind. I have a bit of a logistical question regarding this. I'm wondering if either of you can answer it. Maybe it's not a very smart question, but it's something that's I've been thinking about since I read the book. When, let's say, they take all the shares of a publicly traded company, could that company not respond in some way to that? Because now they would be all of their shares that were previously held and on the free market, so to speak, being exchanged, are now held by a small cartel who how does that situation work out? Can the company come forward and do anything about it, or are they just legally forced to bend the knee in that situation?
I think any company that tries to do that will quickly find that they have new board of directors very quickly, because the shareholders control the board of directors. The board of directors appoints the CEO. So ultimately, companies answer to their shareholders. So they could try. I don't think it would end well for them. I think anybody who tries that would be quickly replaced.
Yeah, and I think any company that tries that would also lose all its credit with the bankers, and they wouldn't survive. And I think that's why you've got companies like BlackRock and Vanguard, even though they hold a lot of stock for millions of investors. I think they're playing this game, and that's why BlackRock is so much closer to the Fed. And I think they're even considered a systemically important fund manager. So they would save BlackRock, and I think BlackRock would, they would sacrifice all the small investors that have put their money with BlackRock and think they have, title to a fund, but they're only titled to a fund, not to the stock. And I think a lot of people own stock through ETFs and funds, so they don't even directly own the stock. So it would be much easier. And I think the reason they're doing that, first of all, you have to be evil to think of doing this over such a long term, but they do, they don't care if they're dead, because it's a long-term plan, and you can't do it like overnight, or else you scare people. But I think it's more that they want a new neo-feudal system where just a few thousand people run everything, and they own everything. And like George Carlin said, it's part of a club, and we're not members of it.
Yeah. Well, let's discuss how to potentially protect yourself from this sort of scenario. Obviously, gold and silver, we're preaching to the choir when we discuss that. I know both of you are sound money advocates, as I am. Um, do you think it's more important than ever in the face of this sort of scenario to actually have some sound money on your hands, free of counterparty risk? Obviously, Jack, I know you're a proponent of Bitcoin, and you also own Bitcoin. Mario, I believe you're not. And I hold Bitcoin as well. I'm kind of I don't have a preference. I consider both as sound money. But I'll start with you, Mario. Is this a reason why it's important to hold physical gold and silver outside of the system?
Yeah, that's right. uh, Especially this, but also because of the currency debasement. I think even if we have a deflationary collapse like Rogers Webb thinks there will be, we could also have a hyperinflationary collapse. So, and even in the deflationary collapse, a lot of companies are going to go bust. A lot of people are going to go bankrupt, and they won't have any dollars or any pounds. But if you have gold and silver, that will, you will you'll be very lucky. You'll be one of the few who has any, real money left. So, yeah, as for Bitcoin, I'm not against Bitcoin or anything. I've looked into Bitcoin, and I even got involved really early in 2012. I understand the concept. It's just that I have a problem with the value proposition. Yes, you have to program and solve some kind of equation. You need to use a lot of energy, and that's fine. And you provide an open source blockchain where no transaction can ever be deleted. but you don't really get anything physical for it. And that's my problem with it. And it hasn't been around as long as gold and silver. So I'm not sure how it will perform in such a event. But I'm not saying people shouldn't have it, but I'm sticking with gold and silver, and I try to promote more this view because there's plenty of Bitcoin promoters out there. So I stick to the original gold and silver. But yeah, just try to be as much outside the system as possible. That's the only way to really protect yourself. Or, if you still believe you can change the mind of politicians, writing to your representatives, I don't think that's going to make any difference. They'll have no idea what you're talking about. And I think the power behind this is like supranational. And by that, I mean, it's the UN, the BIS, the World Bank, the central banks, and the central banks, they hide behind the BIS, which is a supranational entity. So I think it's going to be really hard. The only hope is that we get a hyperinflation and then it destroys everything. And I think it would ruin their plan for the Great Taking, because it's more of a deflationary collapse like strategy.
So, Jack, your thoughts on holding gold and silver here and what role you think Bitcoin might play? I think that was a good point, Mario, about how young of a technology and an asset Bitcoin still is. I would say I see it as a much more highly speculative asset than gold or silver. Jack, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would echo what you said. That is, it is sound money in that it is limited supply. It is wealth safely stored outside the banking system, but at the same time, it is a new technology. Let's be honest, there is no shortage of outright liars, crooks, con artists, and frauds in the crypto space. Tether is a risk that's still out there. So, I'm not going to sit there and say Bitcoin is a safe investment. It's very speculative, totally different risk return profile than gold and silver. So it's not an and/or proposition in any way. But at the same time, there are some overlaps in the qualities there of limited supply outside of the reach of government entities. This is Mario flashes silver. I'll hold this up. This is my Bitcoin silver wallet that my buddy Patrick Hakim over at SatPulse made. It's a 1/2 ounce silver round, and it's also a cold storage wallet for Bitcoin. So I hold this up, and I can do my Bitcoin flash and my silver flash when I do that. So the key to the Great Taking scenario to protect yourself from something like that is to own wealth debt-free outside of the financial system. Right? And you need all three of those things, right? Because if you go on leverage to buy something, that leverage will kill you in the Great Taking, because your assets are gone, money goes away, cash becomes ultra scarce during the Great Taking scenario, and you cannot possibly service your debt. So debt-free is the key to surviving the Great Taking scenario. All right, gold and silver absolutely can protect you from that, in that it is wealth stored outside the financial system. Now, I would add, during a Great Taking scenario, that would be almost a hyper deflation scenario. The dollar value, the nominal value of gold and silver and Bitcoin would drop substantially in that environment, but the spending power would be preserved, at least for gold and silver would. Bitcoin, never seen anything like that, so nobody knows how Bitcoin would react. But there's the story that an ounce of gold got you a very nice men's toga back in ancient Rome. Fast forward through millennia of inflation and fiat expansions and collapses, and now an ounce of gold will get you a nice men's suit. So your wealth is preserved. Don't think of it in nominal dollar value terms. Think of it as preserving your standard of living, preserving your wealth. So wealth outside the financial system, owned outright, debt-free. That's the key there. Now, I would add, the Great Taking is one possible road in the fork that's ahead. Recall the soft landing narrative. Maybe they do Zerpenburg again. So if they go back to Zerpenburg, now we're into the hyperinflationary scenario, the polar opposite of the Great Taking. But also, owning wealth outside the financial system is a good preservation against that. Again, don't think of it in terms of dollar value. Think of it in terms of wealth preservation, because in a hyperinflationary scenario, sure, the dollar value of your gold is exploding higher, but you still get that nice men's suit. So you're not going to get rich in either scenario owning precious metals. It's an insurance policy. It is safety. But there are somewhat different outcomes there, right? If you own assets with a lot of debt in a hyperinflationary scenario, you win big. But if you own assets with a lot of debt, you get crushed in the great taking. So, which direction the central bankers choose to go, debt could either make you or break you. So just be careful. It's not carved in stone which way we go here.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today to both of you. Before I do let you go, Jack, tell us about the Nobody Special Finance YouTube channel.
Nobody Special Finance, that's the name of my channel. I'm also on Twitter at JGNuke. I use the name Nobody Special because I don't have a background in finance. My pedigree is mechanical engineering. I spent 15 years working in commercial nuclear power. I really am fascinated by finance and macroeconomics. And so I'm not passing myself off as an expert or, a trading guru or anything. I just read a lot, and I like to sniff out fraud and corruption and all the things that are plaguing our financial system. That's what I like to talk about on my channel.
Great. Well, I'll put a link to that in the description below. Mario, could you tell us about the Innecco 64 channel?
Yeah, that's my YouTube channel, Innecco 64. I publish a video virtually every day. And my background, on the other hand, is in finance, but I try to educate the public about the terminology that the powers that be in the Wall Street and City of London bankers use, and show people that a lot of it is just BS. And I call myself the home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I'm also on Twitter at Innecco 1964. There's a lot of impersonators there, so you need to be careful on Twitter, even though I have the blue badge. So that's Innecco 64 there.
Great. Well, I'll put a link to that. I'll put a link to both of your Twitters as well for people who want to follow you. And it's been a great conversation, gentlemen. Once again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Jesse. Always a pleasure. Mario.
You're welcome. And thank you, Jesse. And nice to see you again, Jack.
Crisis and Chaos, The Changing World Order, an exclusive live online video event on November 30th. Click below to purchase your ticket now.